So I had to write 116 pieces for sight reading tests from grade 1 to grade 8.
Hiya, you okay? Where are we going? Oh, yeah, that's fine. Reeds have arrived from Daddario. Remember I showed you in the last vlog. For some reason the filed reeds just seem to perform better for me right now. Very special coffee with Dan coming up in a couple of minutes time with saxophonist Andy Scott. Time is short today, so I'm going to get a little bit of practice in before we speak to Andy. Then I better make sure everything works on the computer and we get all that set up. And I am still half asleep this morning. I'm really pleased that I've got Andy Scott of the Royal Northern College of Music and various other different places along for a coffee with Dan. Andy, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
It's a pleasure. Very nice to see you.
How's Cheshire this morning?
Cheshire is cold this morning.
Right. A nice plug for the mug there.
Fortunately, I've got a nice hot coffee here.
So
thank you for that.
So have I as well, strangely enough.
No, I need to have ground coffee.
There we go.
And I don't operate without two first thing in the morning.
What's your sort of origin story of being a saxophone player? What got you going?
Yeah, I mean, briefly, there's always been sort of music in the family. So my dad was a clarinetist and pianist. He went to the Royal College of Music. My auntie's a cellist. She went to the Royal Academy. So I started on cello when I was about 7 or 8. I started sort of suffering from asthma when I was 10 or 11.
Right.
And my parents took me to the doctor, and the doctor said, get him to play a musical instrument like a trumpet or a brass instrument or a woodwind where you're exercising your lungs every day. Well, I think when I was, I took the sort of standard route, I suppose, with music college. In fact, I auditioned at the RNCM and nowhere else. I don't know why I got my head around it. Maybe it's because the family came from the Northwest originally, and there was something I liked about Manchester. I don't know. But anyway, I went to audition there when I was 18 and didn't apply anywhere else.
Great.
And I wasn't offered a place.
Oh, right.
And I came back and I got into the audition. And again, I didn't apply anywhere else. And I went back, I walked into the room a year later. And he said to me, haven't I seen you somewhere before? So I said, damn right you have. You told me to practice for a year, which is what I've done. And then they offered me a place. So those 4 years at college were absolutely brilliant. You know, there was such a buzz about the place. And there were some really good players there as well. But bearing in mind, this is like early days of the saxophone being introduced to music college in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that because we often forget where we are now in the history of the instrument, that our instrument's only been around for about, well, it was patented, 1842, so you're kind of looking at 170 years. It's still quite a young instrument compared to, say, some of the more established instruments. And certainly a lot of conservatoires held back from teaching it.
I mean, I was very lucky because my first week at college, there were two of us. It was the first time they'd had two saxophone players in the same year, which was myself and Rob Buckland. And there were two clarinetists who double sax. And so it's the first time ever they'd had 4 sax players in the same year. So they said, right, they booked us a room, college, and just said, right, every Friday afternoon, 2 till 5, you're a sax quartet. And that started in our first week of our first year. And 33 years later, it's still going. It's the Apollo Sax Quartet. I've never done more than 1 day a week teaching, and it was just something I had in the back of my mind. If I can try, I love teaching. Don't get me wrong, but I also knew with composing and getting projects together and practicing and stuff like that, it all takes up a lot of time. So I just tried desperately to keep to that 1 day a week. It's this thing of being musically open-minded. I think especially younger players coming into the business or at music college, you don't need to say, write something off. I don't like that. I don't like that. I love this. It's not black and white. A lot of stuff seems to be grey. I mean, I just trying to learn something every day. Yeah. Just really listening and appreciating and being musically honest.
Yeah.
Just in terms of just be yourself. Yeah.
Do you think students have access to too much music today? And what I mean by that is, when we were growing up, and I know it doesn't sound that long ago, but basically you had to... the example I always use, the first saxophone CD I owned was Blue Train. There was kind of 4 CDs on Freeport in Fleetwood, and in the shop, jazz CDs, I bought all 4 of them. That was all I had access to, but I listened to it so much, and now I can sing everybody's solo on that album because I've listened to it so much, whereas now I'll listen to an album on iTunes or whatever, and then I won't listen to it again. I'll have to go to a conscious effort to go back and listen to that same album. I'm just bombarded with so much music all the time.
Do you know what? I agree 100% with you, because I think it's, you know, it's like fast food mentality with music nowadays. You know, everything's at the press of a button. You listen to it. Half of the time, people even don't get through a track. The sort of concentration level is, you know, about 1 or 2 minutes a lot of the time. And I do think there is a lot of information out there. And I was doing a class at the RNCM a couple of months ago, actually. And I was saying to some of them, you know, this is a massive problem in society with the younger generation. Social media it's a huge problem, with all sorts of associated mental health issues as well. And it's like these kids feel pressurized because you got the latest like 12-year-old whiz kid on YouTube or Facebook or something playing giant steps. It's like, well, just forget about that.
That's the question I really want to ask you about, which is your composing, particularly the composing you do for associated board exams and things like that. And I just wondered, what's the kind of process with that? Do you get commissioned to write things for the board, or do you just write things and submit them to the board? Or
the writing I do, I mean, it all started off because I had a couple of groups that I got together when I was a student just out of college, and then wrote all the music, got the, you know, more jazz based. Even though I don't consider myself even now a jazz player, but it was through those pieces and through those groups, other musicians, quite a lot of classically trained musicians, heard my music, and I started getting commissions. So a lot of those pieces that are on the associated board, saxophone, clarinet, and flute lists, they were written without the associated board in mind. They were written as pieces of music, and then the associated board invites all sorts of people to sort of submit pieces for consideration. They have a panel of people who go through everything and choose the pieces for the exams. The only time it's been different, which was really fascinating, was when they approached myself and a few other people, I don't know who, because they don't divulge that, but to write sight reading tests. So I had to write 116 pieces for sight reading tests from grade 1 to grade 8.
A lot of the students watching this can thank you for all those sight reading tests. Then, outside of your family, I just wondered if you, and again, I realise there will be lots and lots of people, and I am putting you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot for a reason, to try and tease an immediate answer out. I wonder if you say, outside of your family, who's had the biggest influence on your musical career and your development as a musician?
Well, I hate to sound a bit sort of political, so not answering the question, but I don't think there is one particular person. There are lots of people.
That's a good answer.
Someone like the guys in the Apollo Sax Quartet who I've worked with over the years, because we've playing in the saxophone quartet has been unbelievable. We've commissioned over 100 pieces of music. People play them around the world now, you know, classical, contemporary pieces, which is absolutely brilliant. So I found myself in a rehearsal room with Richard Rodney Bennett or Louis Andriessen or Michael Torkey, or people who've written fabulous pieces for us. Paul Mitchell-Davison, he's written 7 or 8 pieces for the Apollo over the years. Will Gregory used to play in the group, has written some wonderful pieces. Yeah. So I found Django Bates was, again, written a brilliant piece. And you learn so much from hearing their thoughts about the music and about how you play it.
Your best purchase, let's say the last 3 years, you can under £50.
Oh my word, this is so difficult. Maybe a ticket to see Spurs play at Wembley.
Bit of a saxophone geek question here. You may or not be down this route, but I wondered if I could offer you, and this doesn't sound dodgy, I've not stolen a whole load of saxophone, but if you could have anybody's saxophone, whose would you like to have and play or keep, or if you could sort of go to the room and go, hey, look, this is. excellent saxophone. Is there a particular player's saxophone you'd like to have, you know, just to be able to say I've got his saxophone now, or something like, or her saxophone?
It'd be very interesting to. I mean, I've got, in terms of, because I'm a tenor player, practically 100% of the time. I've had a lovely Mark VI, 1954 Mark VI for years and years, silver. And for a lot of the classical playing, I use on a new sort of Selma Series 3. But I've always had a hankering for a super action or super balanced action, as they're nicknamed, but from just before the Mark VI. Yeah. So I think I'd be very interested. There's something in the back of my mind I'd still like to get hold of.
Is there a particular routine you go through? I mean, does the to coin a phrase, the muse bite you when you start writing, or do you have to just sit down and do you work through a certain exercise and think, right, I'm going to take this scale and or this rhythm, I'm going to see where it takes me, or do you have a certain specific routine that gets you going?
I've found out that there was this one time I started writing, thought I had a brilliant idea, scribbled out 17 seconds of this thing, fully scored it for orchestra or whatever, and then hit a brick wall. Had writer's block for 2 weeks, was sitting there, literally couldn't write anything, and I thought, Matt, I've got to avoid this. This can't happen again. And I spoke to a few people about it, and what they suggested, which was fantastic advice, was just get a rough idea of the shape of the piece, the form that you're writing, and spend a bit of time before you actually write a note thinking about the whole thing. So I wrote this octet, and it was sort of to do with Adolf Sax, because I thought we're all here playing this amazing instrument he invented. He died in poverty, he had a very sort of, as we know, colourful life, and then he's been sort of celebrated since. So I noticed there's this old Belgium banknote, 200 franc banknote pre-Euro, and they put a picture of him on it and put the saxophone on. I bought a couple of them from eBay, and I called the piece 200 francs, 200 franc note. And then I wrote this sort of 10-minute piece, but it sort of followed elements of his life. So I spent a month, every now and again, you know, just 5 minutes here and there, scribbling down ideas on a Word document, scribbling things on a manuscript. And then I had the piece mapped out about 9 minutes. There's a bit of improvising in it. There was a bit where I wanted the effect of it being 8 saxes, free improvising, but I notated everything.
If you only got 15 minutes a week, and maybe that sometimes happens with composing duties and teaching duties, but if you only got 15 minutes in a week to practice, what would you practice? What you know, if you had to boil it down and just focus on one, maybe 2 things, what would you? And obviously, don't say I'd have made sure I got more than 15 minutes, but yeah.
No, I mean, ultimately we're looking at sound, aren't we? Yeah. You know, so sometimes if I am writing and I've got a deadline and I have a couple of days away from the instrument, and I come back, the first thing I do is, you know, just warm up and play a bit, but it's trying to feel comfortable with sound first of all.
Andy, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today on Coffee with Dan. I hope you've enjoyed your mug and you've enjoyed your coffee. Go and make yourself another one, and then
we have.
Carry on the rest of the day. Thanks very much, Andy. Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
All the best.
That's a piece. Oh, I'm out of focus there. That's a piece called Heart in Hand off Chris Potter's latest album. I just doing that basically just to blow along with Chris. I was nailing those altissimo notes until I put the record button on here, and then it all went off. Anyway, I've got something I need to show you, totally unrelated from music. In every man's life, when you realise there are certain childhood dreams you're never going to be able to fulfil. I'm never going to be an England opening cricket batsman. I'm never going to play for Manchester United. Never going to drive a Formula 1 car. But this is the second best thing, and I have finally caved in and got F1 2017 with the McLaren 1988 car. my Honda doesn't quite go as fast as one from 30 years ago in a Formula 1 race, but I better go and pick the children up from school. Just finishing the edit now of the Andy Scott interview and the rest of the daily vlog. There's so much in today's vlog. I'm sorry it's so long. I've condensed Andy's interview probably too much. There was so much great stuff in there. I might turn it into a podcast of some kind with some of the other interviews as well. I've still got the audio from most of them, so it might be worth at some point put them into a podcast. But thank you very much for watching. I'm in rugby tops now, but I'm off to play football for the first time this year. So if I don't make it, someone else will hopefully edit this and put it onto YouTube. I'll be fine. Thank you very much for watching. This is what I was up to yesterday. This is what I was up to this time last year. Please make sure you hit subscribe if you don't already, and I will see you hopefully really, really soon. Bye-bye.